I'm Steve Tagg, and we're here today after viewing the first episode of Welcome Home. It's the story of Vietnam veterans. We're all Vietnam veterans here. I served in 1969 and 70 as a Chief Warrant Officer helicopter pilot.
My name is Joseph Giannini. I was in the Marine Corps. I fought in Vietnam in 67 and 68.
My name is John McInerney. I served in the Marine Corps, and I served in Vietnam, 1967, 1968.
I'm Jack McCormick. I served with the United States Marine Corps and fought in Vietnam, January 67 to February 68.
My name is Decker A. Decker. I was with the U.S. Army, and I served in Vietnam in 70 and 71.
All right.
Back in when the war was ended, 1975, how did you guys feel about that when you really knew the war was over?
We were just mentioning it earlier today. I watched the fall of Saigon on television in 1975. I remember I had an apartment in Brooklyn, sitting in front of the television set and watching the helicopter take off from that, I believe it was the embassy roof. And I was sick to my stomach when that helicopter took off, and when I knew that Saigon was falling, and everybody that I had known that had died for nothing. It made me sick. And I had mentioned to John before that I know exactly how the kids that fought in Iraq, who took Fallujah and who took Ramadi, and to watch it go back to where they lost it again, I know exactly how those guys feel. I know the anger that they feel, because I felt that anger, and I'm sure everybody else did.
Well, you three guys were all in the hot
In
spot.
1975, I was still in, I guess you'd call it a state of denial about the war. I was dating my wife, Nikki. I was practicing criminal law already, and Vietnam didn't want to see it, hear it, talk about it. In 75, had no effect on me. I just wouldn't deal with it.
I think when I saw that on television, I was laid off from the fire department, or very close to that period of time. So it was kind of a depressing time anyway. And I was watching that on television, like Decker said, and all I could think of as I watched, I was sitting there with my daughter, sitting in my lap, watching television, and watching this all crumble and collapse. And all I could think of, I could see the faces, and I remember the names of guys who were left there. Just flashed through my mind. I don't even know how quickly, whether it took minutes or seconds or what. I just pictured a certain few guys that I was very close to that lost their lives, and how I just felt drained, like it's all over. Now it's over.
Jack?
I remember watching that on TV, and I had gotten home in 68 and watched the war periodically on TV. And that was the culmination of something. I think I was so, use the term, disgusted, angry, and a lot of emotion. And thinking of all the guys we served with, all the guys we lost, all the guys got hurt, and then they just like threw it away.
Yeah, exactly.
And that sentiment stays with me in terms of what I see today, and certain things that go on with the military and what they commit people to, and then let it go.
I agree.
And that keeps stirring up things in me that I thought I could put away.
Did any of you go to the Vietnam parade when it happened in 85?
Yeah, we did. Jack and I were there together.
I still wasn't ready for that. I wouldn't go.
Yeah, I went.
I went there myself and met a member of my platoon in that throng of people. I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
And they say that when they marched around off the bridge and into Manhattan, they didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
Did you guys know what to expect when you
Well, we marched in fire department uniforms. Jack and I were both officers in the fire department, and we had a contingent of firefighters and officers who were Vietnam veterans. So we had that double contact. We kind of felt at home with these guys marching.
I think that parade was just meant for us. It wasn't a welcome home. I don't think that the American public was too much aware of it. When I was in that parade, I noticed that basically it was just for us. It was just to placate us, our feelings about serving in Vietnam. I don't think it was it closed any doors for any Vietnam veterans.
Oh, no, I don't think it was supposed to do that at all.
Yeah.
I think it was supposed to make everybody happy, the people, the civilian population as well as us. I mean, it's,
I never got the sense that the civilians
you know,
were aware of it. I don't even think people remember it today.
Yeah, like you said, we didn't know what to expect. And John and I discussed this just recently. As we came over the Brooklyn Bridge, around Chambers Street, around City Hall, and you could hear the noise going, and we made the turn to go south on Broadway, and the noise, and we didn't know what to expect, but it was like a welcome relief at that point.
yeah, there was a lot of civilian involvement there.
Yeah. But
I don't think that really, that didn't, like I said, I don't think it closed any doors. I was there. I remember that. I got nothing out of it.
Well, I knew some guys in the fire department who were Vietnam veterans that told me, when I asked them, are you going to the parade? And they said, no, it's too late.
Yeah.
They're too late with this.
I
didn't argue with them.
I was actually in the area because the Kings County Supreme Court is there. I did a lot of work there. I saw the parade. I just wouldn't join in. I don't know. Maybe I felt it was too late, not enough. I just didn't want to do it.
Interesting thing is, I don't know what the motivation actually was behind it. All of a sudden, it was a parade.
Yeah, it's there.
And I got called by somebody, would you like to march with the fire department? You were a vet. We all were notified about it. We marched. There was some relief going down south on Broadway, or feeling, but like you said, it didn't close the doors. I mean, we lived with experiences that a parade wouldn't take away.
No, I don't
agree.
think so either.
But, I think we should talk about a little bit the connection with Jack, John, and me. Jack and I were actually in college together. Well, it was a long time ago, 1961, right?
61, yeah.
And then what happened is Jack went into the Marine Corps in '66, right?
Yeah.
March. And I went into the Marine Corps in March '66, and John too. But we didn't know that we each had gone into the Marine Corps, and we ran into one another. And it's actually, and then I didn't see Jack until around 1984.
20 years.
And you want to tell him what I did to you?
Well, I had written it into Joe, and keep it right to the story, is that I mentioned I was with 2-4, the Magnificent Bastards, and he said, 2-4? I said, yeah, and I had gotten out of there in February. And there was a major battle, and John participated, so did Joe, in this battle at Dido. And I hadn't even heard about it, because I had left that war behind me. And Joe wouldn't tell me. He wouldn't tell me. I said, well, what happened? No, he doesn't. I don't want to talk about it. And it took me years later to find out. And then John and I started to talk about it. And then when we started meeting other people, but Joe wouldn't tell me, and it was a horrific experience for those guys. And once I heard about it, some of the things that bothered me is, my guys. I had 3 guns, I had 3 squads, and I was concerned how they made out. And I started to pursue trying to contact people, and I was successful after a number of years getting hold of a couple of guys. But I think as somebody. The sergeant from the Marine Corps in the Welcome Home video we just saw, he expressed it very succinctly. As he was leaving, he felt guilty in so many words that he was leaving his guys, even though he was wounded and didn't have to go back. I mean, those are feelings a lot of us had.
I had them myself.
Yeah.
I think it was different with World War II. I might be mistaken, but I believe that they went over as a unit and the survivors came back as a unit. I think that was the case for World War II veterans. And to come go there and come back. You're going there with the family, and you're coming back with the family.
You mean
And you can,
the other troopers?
the other troopers, and you could sort of like let out your feelings to people that you were with. You could have like a come down on the way home. But for us, we were alone on that airplane coming home. We didn't know anybody that was on the plane with us. When we hit that Freedom Bird, we flew home and we were alone. And when we landed, we were all of a sudden thrown into the civilian population, and our lives were dictated by our past. And our past was the past year that we spent in Vietnam. And it was like you're shipwrecked on an island. And that's the way I felt, you know.
Yeah, I recall coming home like that. There was no one else in my hometown that was serving at the time, Amityville, Long Island. We had lost a fellow before I even was in the Army, where you guys were up by Kensington. He was in country 18 days before he passed. And I never really realized how vicious that battle was until you fellas enlightened me.
You're talking about Kensington?
Yeah.
No, Jack was actually at Kensington. We were somewhere else, but he could tell you. Tell us just a little bit about it, because I don't think people understand.
Kensington, it was a fire base 2 miles south of the DMZ, and it was there for a purpose of stopping troops from the north and NVA from coming across the border and taking over initially taking over the northernmost province, Quang and it was within distance of artillery on the other side, and in Laos they had artillery in Laos, they had artillery on the other side of the DMZ. And it was under constant barrage of artillery, rockets, and mortars. Plus, there were entrenched NVA elements there that we constantly ran into. And it went on for over a year. I mean, in July of '67, Operation Buffalo, they almost decimated the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines. And it was a constant confrontation there with them in large elements. And it wasn't the VC, it was regular troops.
Hardcore. NVA. Yeah.
Good troops. You have to respect them. They were good troops. They were fighting on an equal par with us. And we didn't have air support. And many a time we wouldn't get back to a solid, safe position. But it was we blocked an invasion down south.
I just remembered something. In November of 1967, our battalion flew in and we landed right outside the perimeter of Kensington. You remember that?
No.
You don't remember?
No.
We came off the helicopters under a barrage of artillery. We were outside the perimeter of Kensington, and we actually made a sweep, and we didn't make much contact. But coming off those choppers during an artillery barrage, I was terrified. I was terrified. But tell them about that story about you watched, what is it, recoilless rifle, just...
We were, what they would do on Kensington, they'd have the hill wrapped in barbed wire, and everybody in the hill had bunkers. Then they would put 4 battalions essentially in each quadrant outside, and we would move periodically, and we'd come back, we'd set in, and we'd be set in outside the wire in holes, essentially. And one evening, I see a 106 recoilless rifle, which is on a mule. It's a small 4-wheeled vehicle. We'd call them mules. And this recoilless rifle set in, and it had a 50 caliber gun on it that he would use with traces to spot positions where he wanted to fire if he had to, the 106 recoilless rifle. And he was setting in what they call night defensive fires. And I looked over, he was shot a couple of rounds. Next morning, sun rises, I'm sitting by the side of my hole, I'm having a cup of coffee. I look over, there's a Marine sitting on the edge of the mule, apparently having coffee. I turned my head and I could hear this boom, and then boom, he was gone. And they had spotted him the night before. The next morning, just at dawn, they blew them away. But that was, it was up there. It was constant contact.
Yeah. Did you guys have sappers up there? Sappers. The NVA or the Vietcong going under the wires.
Oh yeah, they do everything. Are you kidding?
I had a
That's fine,
sapper attack down in Light K. They came in under the wire one night, and I remember this really well. They blew up, I think, 4 helicopters. But coming in, they killed a bunch of Arvins silently at the gate that they came in from. I was in my hooch. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning when the first one went off. And I remember getting out of my hooch, and the hooch was surrounded by sandbags, and taking my weapon and going in between the hooch behind me and the sandbag in front of me, and hearing those rounds go off, hearing those satchel charges go off. They took out, I think, 4 or 5 helicopters, and I stayed up all night waiting for a ground attack to come, and it never did. The next day, American sappers came in, and they took all the armaments, all the ordnance off of those helicopters that were scattered all over the place, off to a corner, and they blew them all up. That was a very scary night for me.
Where was that?
That was in Light K.
On K?
Light K.
You mean the Central Highlands?
No, 3 Corps. North of Saigon.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
John, we're talking about incoming. Tell them about Alpha 3.
Alpha 3 was a base right next to Cantienne, where Jack was. There was a base at Cantienne. It was supposed to be a line. They call it the McNamara line. And there was the first base was over on the coast, and they worked their way across, right across underneath the DMZ, facing North Vietnam. And Cantienne was A4, but they needed another one called A3 right next to it. There was a gap between the two. So they sent our battalion up there to start a fire base. And we just patrolled in there under fire at night. We dug in at night. It was pouring rain, and the enemy was all around us. And we're just digging holes in there and taking turns. And it was just like we were on a construction site. And we dug in and we opened up that base. And once they figured out where we were and what we were going to be doing, it was permanent. They shelled us every day. I mean, they hit us with stuff from North Vietnam. They had what they call a 152 millimeter artillery round. Nothing shook me up like that. When that thing landed close by, and we got dozens of them every day, you'd be cross-eyed. I told doctors about this only a couple of years ago, and I told this one doctor how I had my head slammed up against the wall of the bunker from these heavy artillery rounds, and I couldn't see straight for 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was. My eyes were like crossed. I felt the pressure. And she looks at me and she says, you might have brain damage.
Okay.
And I went, you think?
Let me
That's
just.
for real. But that's how bad that place was. It was.
Hit some more. Tell some more.
It was like it wasn't. People say, Vietnam wasn't as bad as World War II.
World War One.
It was World War One. I try to explain to people where we were. This was like the
Battle of the Somme.
the Maginot Line, or whatever they call it up there, the Battle of the Somme. It was just like World War One. They're shelling and heavy artillery, and they'd mix that in with a ground attack once in a while, or we'd go out on a patrol. They'd send us out on patrols in a place like this. And,
Which is suicide,
and,
but thank God.
You'd come
The first
screaming
patrol.
back into the wire. It was a rough place. It was
I
right
like to
between
add a
Cantienne and
couple of
Jiolin.
Yeah.
If you look at a map, that's where it was, called A3, Alpha 3. Didn't even have a name, Alpha 3.
What do you want to add?
Well, no,
Throw
I
it
don't
in.
know. I don't know. I think when people ask me about fear, the thing that terrorized me was incoming rockets and artilleries. The rockets up there was absolutely no defense. It didn't matter whether you were in a hole or in a bunker. If it came close enough, they were delayed detonating, they would go right in and you'd be gone. And when a barrage started, I had a little bunker, about the size of a grave. And John
Good
was
as hell.
Nice way to
John
put
was
it.
probably like 20 meters away from me all the time. And I would get in the corner of the bunker, right? Just put my head in the corner. And I was terrorized, and I started laughing. Like, you were almost going insane.
Yeah, you were.
That's how it was.
Yeah, it's a good way to describe it.
And the rounds, the rocket rounds were so close that my bunker would actually bounce around. You would bounce it, I swear.
Well,
to God, you would bounce it.
at that particular
Around.
time, it rained for, I counted how many days. It rained for 22 days straight. No, we're outside.
That means
We're
the
out-
hole is full.
I mean, the bunker inside had this much rain inside it, mud inside it, and we were soaked all the time. And the sun finally came out. And when the sun came out, we were able to get air support. So the jets were flying overhead and bombing these guys that were shooting artillery at us. So I was a squad leader, so I told everybody out of the bunker, take your socks off, wring them out, dry them out on the sandbags, and we're sitting outside because all these airstrikes are going on for hours. And all of a sudden, the airstrikes stop, and we hear the artillery booming in the background. As soon as they stopped bombing, they started shooting the artillery at us. As soon as it stopped, and we're diving back in the bunker again.
See, I was happy not to be in the Marines because
I want to hear something about being in a helicopter.
I was just going to tell you that.
And
Being in a helicopter was an entirely different world.
Yeah, but
When people find out that I was a gunship pilot, they always say thank you. Because chances are some grunt somewhere got his butt pulled out of a sling by a helicopter pilot who flew in and saved his ass. The fun part about it was being a gunship pilot, our job was to kill the enemy. And you guys often gave us the opportunity to do that because you'd get yourselves into situations where, or they got you into situations where you couldn't get out of. Many times we were called to support a fire base where the guys were stuck inside the wire. We're overhead. We know where they are. We don't know where the enemy is until we fly over, then we find out. That's the way we find out where the enemy was. You'd fly over, get shot at, and a few situations where I flew over and ended up getting shot down
you
on the way out.
were shot down.
Yes, I was
And
shot
so
down twice. Engine failure once, tail rotor failure once.
Tail rotor failure.
Would you explain that a little bit more?
Tail rotor failure.
What were you
Tail
shot
rotor
down
failure.
by?
Oh, it could be anything.
You were shot down?
Yes.
What do you think shot you down?
Well, it obviously was like 30 caliber armor piercing, maybe,
Just a regular
or small arms.
machine gun?
Yeah,
A very angry North Vietnamese guy with a gun
yeah. It only takes one bullet to take down a helicopter if it's in the right place.
in the transmission.
So
That's-
describe to me, you get hit and you know you're going down. What's going on?
Well, it's a combination of a couple of things. You're the aircraft commander, so your first responsibility is to save the ship, not the people in it. It's the Army's ship. So you've got to get it on the ground without doing any pilot error, error, which is you've lost your engine, you put the pitch down, that breaks the clutch at the top to keep the rotor freewheeling now. So the air is rushing through it this way to keep you in the air, sort of. But as we were told, Bravo Model Huey has the same aerodynamic capabilities as a brick. So you're going to fall almost straight down. So you auto-rotate as best you can. Closer you get to the ground, you flare the aircraft so your nose high. Try to knock the tail boom off. It's the best thing you can do. Then you hit the ground flat and just slide.
Is that what happened with you?
Yeah.
So nobody got hurt?
Everybody got out of that one.
And you got shot down
Another time
What
when
happened
not
then?
everybody got
What?
out. Not everybody got out. It was a very bad place. We had, I can't tell you how many NVA were out there, but they were hardcore and they were in for a
What
fight.
did they shoot you down with this time?
They were shooting B-40s,
rockets.
and
To tell the people what they are.
B-40 it's sort of like a rocket. The first one that I took hit the cowling of the engine, and we felt it inside because we all kind of went like that, and it didn't take us down. But the next thing that we got was a barrage of small arms. I mean, traces everywhere. And they said they counted 128 holes in the helicopter when I got done. Got on the ground, and we were okay, but 2 guys died.
They died from the crash?
From the
small arms
small
fire?
arms fire, yeah. It goes right through a helicopter.
So
It's
how
amazing.
did you get out of that situation?
You just, at that point, you're on the ground, you set up a perimeter, and shortly after that, fortunately for us, there were Korean troops not far, and they perimetered around our perimeter to make sure that we were safe.
Did you recover the bird?
We did. I actually have a picture of it being chinooked in.
You recovered both birds.
Yeah, yeah.
We used to hate to see helicopters.
Well, the
most
one
of
that was
time,
actually the worst one was the
right?
day after Christmas in
like 'em.
1969. I was going inbound to confirm a gun run on a proposed landing zone. And about the time I was making the turn, my engine just quit. It just stopped. And you could hear it unwind. The turbine always makes the same sound because it's going in a circle. And it just started to unwind, and the whole crew heard it. And I said, oh man, this is going to be a hard landing, because we had full ammo, hadn't fired a shot yet. We had all the gas, we had just taken off. So this was that one big heavy helicopter. 4 guys on it, full load of minigun, all kinds of stuff. About 150 feet, that's all we had. So I flared the aircraft as hard as I could, and it hit really, really hard. And that thing was burning like crazy when we got out of it. And fortunately, I was able to get out. I was knocked out. Everybody was knocked out. Nobody had their helmets left on. They were all gone. And we were able to get the crew out. Everybody went home, thank God. But we were all pretty messed up. It was bad.
Just one more question. You mentioned your friend that was shot down early in the morning one
Yeah,
time.
yeah, Bill.
Did he survive?
He did.
And you went to his rescue?
Yes, yeah. I only had we had one ship left, that was it.
It's
That's what I had to
interesting for me to hear your view.
When I was in the Air Force Reserve, the pilots used to say, I was in a C-141 transport planes, and the pilots used to say, I wouldn't fly anything that has to beat the hell out of the air to stay up.
Well,
Need
a
a
helicopter
helicopter.
is basically just, it does work, but it's 1,000 mistakes that makes it work.
Yeah,
It's not anything that,
yeah. Regular pilots of regular airplanes.
they don't want any part of it.
No, when they're near.
I actually took up a colonel from the Air Force. He wanted to fly in a helicopter. He said, I'm so fascinated by these things, I want to fly. So I said, okay, I'll trade you. You take me up in your Wild Weasel and your F4, and I'll take you up in a helicopter. Well, I took him up in a helicopter, and the whole time he's sitting there, he's like this. He's like this, and he's looking back and forth. And I said, what's the matter? He says, we're moving so goddamn slow.
I never liked
I gotta tell you, it's funny.
Did you like flying in them, really? I mean,
I love flying.
Flying.
I loved it.
I was.
I had a lot of
I
hours.
didn't like them.
I loved it.
Well,
You get so used to it that my first helicopter ride when I got to Vietnam, I was scared to death.
sure.
You know, just sitting by an open door scared the hell out of me. By the time I left Vietnam, my legs were dangling out the door. I was smoking
Yeah,
a cigarette in the bay. The helicopter would tilt over like that, and I'd be looking straight ahead at the ground. Nothing would be holding me in except centrifugal force. I was so used to it,
Yeah.
and I loved flying. I loved it. I missed it. I missed it a lot.
And flying in a war zone is a whole nother game than flying
Yeah,
as
well, but
Well, one of the things I didn't particularly care about helicopters was they were always bringing me somewhere I'd rather not be going to.
yeah, right.
Right, and
If you're in a helicopter,
very
you're in
rarely,
trouble.
the Marine Corps didn't have as many
that's true.
helicopters
I got a
per
funny story.
unit as maybe the Army did. And then what would happen was it'd take us all day to move a couple of companies because they allocate, I don't know, 4, 6,
Yeah, it was
46s, and then you'd walk back. They never, very rarely did they fly you back.
If they did fly you back,
did
it was
that on
so
purpose.
disorganized. It was,
Well,
at one time, they flew us, took us out after we went on pulled out of a sweep. We had to get to a safer area, relatively safer, and then they bring in choppers to take us out. And like Jack said, they didn't have many, so they'd have 2 or 3 choppers bringing out 300 or 400 guys from 2 companies, and they'd run to the choppers. Unorganized, just whoever got on, and the guy in a chopper would go, that's enough, and they'd take off. And this one time, they're all gone, and I'm sitting in this clump of bamboo, and I look out, I don't see anybody. Everybody's gone. And then I see a guy stick his head out of another clump of bamboo, and I wave to him, and he waves back. I said, come here, and he comes over, and then a third guy comes over. We were the last 3 guys in this area to be picked up. And I thought, I remember saying to these 2 guys, because I was the highest ranking guy, they may not come back for us. We better get ready to spend the night. I'll never forget the look on these kids' faces. They looked at me in horror, and here comes this helicopter. It was a twin blade CH-46, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And they landed, and they came back for us. And we jumped back on the chopper.
You know, something you said earlier, John, about people, how was the war? What do you compare it to? You know, and then something you had said on the video,
Yeah, it was
what
good.
the fear that you left behind. And you know, the thing is, everybody looks at the war as the big picture. That all this thing is going. The war is you, the individual grunt or pilot who's. That's, you know, that's where he is in this condition.
Right.
Yeah.
And the experience you have from every day that you live. You know, we all lived, in, especially humping out in the boonies. There was a tension that you lived with all day that you got. I comfortable with, but there was always that tension that you lived. When you flew, there must have been tension, right? When you're involved in that kind of combat.
When you heard the rounds ricocheting around inside the cabin, you were, it got your attention real quick.
Well, that big picture concept you're talking about comes from, a lot of it comes from people who make comparisons, who were never in a war themselves, and they say things like, well, it wasn't like World War II. Well, actually, it was like World War II, because what they don't understand is when you're like us, infantrymen, and you're in a gunfight, and most of the gunfights in Vietnam were, if you were in the front, they were only 20 yards in front of you. And you would be shooting it out for the first hour, 2 hours, whatever it was, to fight for your life. And all you were concerned about was an area that was maybe 20 yards wide, the same as the guys on Normandy, the same as the guys on Iwo Jima, the same as the guys that fought in Remagen. All those infantrymen cared about was these guys that are right in front of me.
Yeah.
The big picture?
Yeah.
What big
I'd like
picture?
to add to that, John. He's absolutely right. There were times when, I remember one night, you probably remember this, the battalion set up, it probably was October 67. For some reason, the battalion set 3 companies on a big hill and set Bravo Company on a small hill. And during the night, the NVA attacked. They must have made a mistake. They attacked the 3 companies rather than the 1 company. And we could hear everything that was going on. And they never bothered us. You remember that night?
I was in a...
And they were really close, and we couldn't even help them, our own Marines, because if we opened fire, we'd be firing into our own positions.
Yeah.
And they actually, they broke into the lines, and they killed a whole bunch of Marines. They were in the lines before the Marines knew they were there. And they killed one of my friends that night, Joe Welker. We were in OCS, and they killed the executive officer of, I think it was Charlie Company. But all I was concerned with was my guys,
a little area.
my platoon. We're okay.
This is
They're
the
not
whole
coming
world
after
right
us.
here.
Well,
This is our world,
exactly. You're in your chopper. You're concerned with your crew.
It's your crew.
I
That's
don't
it.
care what anything else beyond. I got to worry about these guys.
Everything was localized. I remember one night, me and a couple of guys were sitting out on the in the active on the runway, and it was the middle of the night, and we're looking at the sky, and there was a fence, and on the other side of the fence was the Arvin compound, and where we were up in Quan Loy, there was about 250 Americans, and our perimeter was guarded by an Arvin unit, and they had their encampment on the other side of the fence. And they started taking incoming. And all the incoming was landing on the other side of the fence. And we just sat there and we were watching it, and we were not even concerned. And I remember my friend Lewis, my best friend, and I said, let's go back and play some chess. And we did. We went back to our hooch while those guys were getting the shit knocked out of them. And we started playing chess. And it was like, it was so localized. Everything was so focused on yourself in Vietnam
And the men
and the
around
guys
you.
that were around.
That's the way it was.
And I remember, Steve, you asked during the interview, what did you fight for? You fight for the guy that's your friend, the guy that's right next to you, and you fight for yourself. You don't have any grand view of fighting for the country or anything like that.
No, it's very personal.
Very personal.
Very personal.
Yeah, it is.
You remember the night where Operation Cochise, and I had the first platoon in Bravo Company, and we got into a bad fight on the hill, and you were just like right next to us, but nobody was bothering you people at all.
No,
It's like,
just sat there.
we got into a really serious firefight with these NVA. They were in the lines, in my lines. Meanwhile, he's tied in. We were on a small hill, some of my platoon. He's tied in with my other squads. Nothing's happening to them, but we're like up there. Like,
Nothing for me to shoot at. I'm just going to sit
it
there
was
and
all
stay
happening
quiet.
just in front of me, and nobody got it.
Yeah, it's
You know.
it's the same. But the point is, it's the same in every war.
Every war.
World War I
Exactly.
guys, no matter how big the war was, the infantryman had this little area in front of him he's got to worry about.
You know,
Somebody
that-
comes out of there, I'm going to stick him with my bayonet. That's it.
You know, when I hear people say that, oh, you didn't have it that bad, you know, because
Yeah, it's another one.
that's
yeah.
bullshit, because there are 50,000 plus guys on the wall down in Washington that could give you a different
Give you a
story.
different opinion of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what they never told us? How many we were fighting. Did anybody ever tell you how many
No.
NVA? First of all, you figured out right away there was actually two wars going on. We were fighting guerrillas and we were fighting the NVA. So we're fighting irregulars and we're fighting conventional forces. And it could be any time, anywhere. And we never knew how many there were. But guess what? There were a lot more of them than us.
Oh, yeah.
There always was.
I
Absolutely.
just read something recently where they talked about Kensington, and they said there were 36,000 NVA on the other side of that river there, waiting to come across. I know you guys at Dido, on my battalion, and you guys hooked up with that battalion. They said they didn't know how many then, but years later they said something like 8,000.
8,000.
8,000 or more. I mean, those are like, what? Are
Yeah,
you
we
kidding me?
slammed right
How
into
many,
them.
how many were you?
800.
We were
800 of us.
If we had 800.
And they piecemealed us into the fight. There was when they discovered that these guys had come down from North Vietnam.
whole division. Really.
There was a whole division, and this one colonel who had his hands full. He said, I don't know what to do here." And the general at the base said, "Well, do something, because the next stop for these guys is my mess hall." You know, so they sent one company at a time to try and fight these guys, and every
2-4 he's talking
Every
about.
company got annihilated, including mine. And it was so bad that one of the Medal of Honor winners in a book wrote about when we came across the river into the village there. We were so outnumbered and so outgunned. He was watching this thing go on from where he was. Like Decker says, a guy in the next tree line would just sit there and watch the whole thing like it was an event. And he said, I knew my Marine Corps history, and I watched the invasion of Tarawa right there in Vietnam. And if anybody who knows Tarawa, it was a slaughter. And it was similar to that.
Yeah.
But nobody knew about that back home.
Listen, what he's talking about is one of the biggest battles of the war. If you go to the Marine Museum down in Virginia, I think they took like Quezon, what was the city? Way,
Way, yeah.
Dido,
Yeah.
and
Frontier.
we didn't know how many we were fighting, and I want John to talk about it more. But it turned out there was 8,000 North Vietnamese trying to overrun us. And I actually, I was XO of Charlie Company at the time. After you, his company was,
We were wiped out.
they were gone
Totally
already.
wiped out.
Your battalion, forget it. We went in to relieve the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. I don't know, I probably told you this. We actually walked through your lines. It was like being on a movie set. There were dead Marines everywhere.
It was terrible.
And enemy weapons.
Yeah.
And an occasional enemy body. We literally walked through your lines, and this is not good for 2-4. I was with Charlie Company that day. We collected 55 dead Marines, your guys, wrapped them in their ponchos. I watched our chaplain close their eyes, whatever.
Yeah.
But the battle was crazy. But tell them how we 2-4 decimated. They send in Bravo Company, one company, to help and tell them what happened.
We ran right into these guys. They were sitting there waiting for us in a tree line, and they put us on these Amtraks, where Amtrak was able to float. It was like a personnel carrier that could also float. And they took us across the river, and halfway across the river, they opened up on us with everything they had in this tree line. They knew you couldn't turn around and go back. You had to keep going. And we just kept going until we hit the riverbank, and they just slaughtered us. Without getting into detail, they just killed and wounded almost everybody that was in the company. We were just standing in the open, 20, 30 yards of space between this riverbank and that tree line, and nowhere to go. We had nowhere to run. You just put your face in the mud, and then after a time, I started looking around and seeing all these dead Marines laying around me, beside me, and I just thought, I'm going to take some of these guys with me. This is where I die. At 21 years old, I'm saying to myself, this is where I'm going to die today. And I just jumped up and started firing back.
Yeah.
One magazine after another, just kept firing. And bullets they hit my rifle. Bullets went through my canteens, and not one bullet hit me. And I just kept firing back. And that's how the afternoon went. Until finally somebody said, we're pulling back. And I thought, we're pulling back where? California? Where are we going? The water's behind us. And we just pulled back till we got to the water. And the sight, as I'm talking now, I'm picturing all these Marines, some of them with bayonets on the end of their rifles, behind this riverbank, and some of them dragging dead guys back with us, and just looking at this line of guys behind this red dirt, not knowing what's going to happen next. What's going to happen next? We're dead here.
Yeah, that was the war. You never knew what was going to happen next.
And then you find out that nobody back home even heard about this. Nobody even knew.
Well,
2 years later.
Within a few minutes, I think, the CEO, Lieutenant Norris, was killed.
He was
and,
killed.
Only one officer survived.
We had no leadership.
that
Everybody
fight.
was dead.
My captain
That's
got the
all.
Medal of Honor at that battle.
Yeah, that
We had
was,
2 Medal of
Livingston,
Honors
yeah,
within
yeah.
2 days.
Yeah.
All the officers in Bravo Company except for Tepin, that was his name.
Well, he came later.
Was killed.
Yeah.
Livingston came with his company later and actually saved the day.
Yeah.
He was an
I've talked to him. and it's-
unbelievable man, a brave man.
Yeah.
But it was crazy because after
was
2-4 pulled out, I mean, they couldn't fight anymore. I was saying they had to call up their bakers and candles. They had
Oh,
I mean, they were like
Yeah, everybody.
they were shot.
But
They're-
the bottom line on that battle, the Marine Corps held them.
we had stopped
And the
them,
Army,
yeah.
I think 196, is there
They came in, but
196
they were
.8?
so-
21st Infantry.
Somebody came up.
Which one?
Not-
21st.
21st
They brought them up to help us. And they did a
That lasted 30 days
fantastic
at
job,
least.
these guys.
The
But
first
you know,
couple of days were horrible.
yeah, there was some Army units, well, maybe one, at least one. We never saw them, but they were in the fight.
Yeah. But subsequent days, Joe, they brought up the Army also.
What was I going to say? What it came down to was 2-4 was beaten pretty, they were decimated. So they sent us in. I'll tell you, we weren't even 500 Marines. We weren't. And that was it. We were facing 8,000 North Vietnamese, and the only thing that saved our asses was supporting fire. I'm talking, every artillery in the I Corps must have been firing on the enemy positions, and bomb runs and gunships. That's what saved us.
What saved us at Dido that first day when we pulled back to the riverbank were helicopters. Helicopter gunship pilots were hovering. I don't know if that's what they actually were spinning, like on a sort of a circle, and firing
Right
directly
in it.
into this thing so we could get back behind the riverbank and get some cover.
That was
What
always
What
fun.
saved us? The only thing that saved. The only reason few of us are alive today is because of that.
But that area, and that was just actually southeast of Kensington. That was near Dong Ha,
Yeah,
the major
so-
base, a major base.
That
If
was
they had
their
gotten through
objective.
But the interesting thing is that battle, Kensington battle, and we talked about how many numbers, and did we know the numbers on the other side? We had no clue.
No.
Yeah, yeah, no idea.
There were, there were thousands of them.
Yeah.
And then, first of all, I'm a corporal. Nobody's telling me nothing. Just do this and do that. I got a map, and I have a map for this much of the territory. And I'm on, I have to do what I have to do. But we lost. I mean, that was in April, May. My experience is up around Contiend, September into October, and other battalions up there. It was a constant reduction in force. I mean, I mentioned on that video, 600 up, 300 back, and I find out, no, we went up with 900 and we come back with 300 that could fight. I mean, we constantly, that
I want to
troop
say,
loss.
Anyhow, it was 1-3 minus Bravo Company facing 8,000 North Vietnamese. And Charlie Company was basically on the left flank, and then Delta, and then Alpha. And I don't know where you guys are. You were back there. You were still there.
I was good.
But anyhow,
I was
we're up
wounded
front,
second day.
and I'm the XO, and I'm with the first platoon. They're point for the company, and we're in this graveyard. Remember, the graves were really about 10 feet high. We're in a graveyard that is huge, and that's the only thing that was really saving us. We had cover in the graveyard. Meanwhile, Delta Company, to our right, was in the open, on a dry open paddy, and the NVA waited till Delta Company got right up to the village and then hit them.
Yeah.
And just pinned them down, but they couldn't get to us. But as I was with the captain, and I was listening to the radio, and there was a forward observer above us. He was flying around, and he radios down. And I could hear the traffic, and he said, I've never seen anything like this. There are thousands of them, and they're coming right at you. You got to pull back. Yeah. It's like, and I heard that. And then I would be looking, I would look out, and I would see the NVA. They were all over. And and finally, the order came to pull back, and I wrote about it.
Yeah.
That was one of those situations where I thought maybe wasn't going to make it.
So you guys have all been through tremendous tragedy during this war. How in the world do you equalize it over your lifetime? How do you deal with it?
Deal with it by talking to them.
I had a shrink at the VA ask me that. He says to me, why did you just come in now? He knew my outfit. He knew 1-3. He says, I know of that outfit. And he asked me about it. So you're in the Battle of Dido? I said, yeah, I was. He says, yeah, I know all about it. He was a great psychiatrist out in Northport. And he's asked me about these things, and he says, let me ask you a question. He says, why did you just come in now for this? I said, I was in the fire department in the city of New York. I said, you didn't tell people you had some kind of a problem from the war or what they call today PTSD. You didn't go to see psychiatrists. If they found that out, you were stigmatized.
Nobody knew what PTSD was.
Well,
back
it didn't
then
even
anyway.
exist.
It didn't exist.
And you just didn't say you had any type of problem, emotional problem from these experiences, because you were looked at as, well, maybe you couldn't be a cop or a fireman.
Right.
So I didn't say anything. So he said to me, well, how did you deal with this all those years? I said, I was in the perfect place. I was in Brooklyn in the 70s and 80s, fighting fires. You didn't have time to think about this other stuff.
When did you first go for help? What year?
The thing is, there's a certain adrenaline we all experienced in those heated moments in combat. Right? I refer to it as an adrenaline. And that, you come off and you enter the fire department, in our case, that adrenaline was satisfying because we were in areas that we were fighting a war, a different type of war.
And the relationship, like you brought out with the guys you worked with, was the same as combat.
Yeah, you went from a unit and you joined a unit, which was probably the best thing.
And terribly busy, fire after fire after fire, all night.
For me, it was all personal. It was. I told you in the video that you asked me if I went to the wall, if I ever went to the wall. I never went to the wall. I went to the virtual wall, and I have a friend that was my friend Michael Keyes. The worst thing I ever did was see his birthday, and his birthday's today. Today's November 4th. And tomorrow's my birthday. It's November 5th. And he's dead. And every November 4th, today, I think about this guy. Yeah. Because he'd be my age. He'd be like a day older than me right now. But he's dead. And he was my friend. He was my friend in Vietnam. And you ask how you deal with it. You guys came home and you joined the unit. I didn't go through battles like you guys did. It must have been hell. But I came home with the battle in my head, and a lot of guys did.
What I want to know is when each of us went for help finally.
I never went for help.
You never went for help?
No. My
you
wife
s-
saved my life.
Are you saying that you don't have post-traumatic stress?
I'm not saying I don't have it. I'm saying I could deal with it. I'm saying when I came home, I had a bad time of it, a very bad time of it. The best thing that happened to me is I married Janet. She pulled me right out of it.
But
She made my life normal again.
Did you talk to her about
No.
Vietnam?
No.
You had no one to talk to?
Nope.
Nobody
So
wanted
when-
to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
What about you, Steve?
I
Did you
felt
get help?
therapy for myself when I came back was to talk about it.
Wait, when did you get it?
I was pretty much riddled with it when I came back.
I think we all were.
You know, I mean, I
Yeah.
had bad temper. I drank like
Yeah, we all
God
did
knows
the
what.
same
Drinking.
things.
Bad
Um,
temper.
Yep.
But
Bad.
when did you go for see a
I never
psychiatrist?
did, but just recently I
Just
went
re-
over and they classified me in 2 minutes.
Just recently. You mean 2015?
Yeah.
You waited all this time?
Yep.
Jack, how long did it take you?
First of all, it took me at least 25 years to even talk to anybody about it. And after I retired, it started to bother me even more. I had dreams, I had other things which I didn't share with anybody. My wife knows about the dreams. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and stuff, but I never shared that with anybody. And then after I retired, things got somewhat, I don't want to say worse, but I realized that adrenaline was no longer being satisfied, I guess, you know, that's it. And I went to talk to people in the VA, and I went to groups and
What
talked
year
about
was it, Jack?
what was this, 15? Maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that I actually talked to
Talking about
anybody outside myself.
2010.
Yeah, it took
What
me
about-
years.
What about you, John?
About 2011.
And I went for help in 2002 only because my wife and my younger son insisted I go get some help. I went to get some counseling, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. I went a lot, and I was not happy, and I was mad that she diagnosed me, and I stopped going. And then it took me 8 more years. And again, my wife and my younger boy saying, you got to go get some help. And I went to the VA in 2010,
Does it help?
and I got the help. And there's something that went on with us. I mean, we just,
Well, it changed us. You couldn't go through Vietnam without coming home a different person. I wasn't the same person
No.
I was before I went to Vietnam. I think I mentioned in the
Not at
video,
all.
or the original video, that Vietnam was like a milestone. You were one way going up to that milestone, but once you crossed that milestone, crossed that bridge, there was no going back. You're a totally different person, absolutely a different person. You're not the same person. You went there, and everybody that, when you came home, everybody expected to see the person that they
That
knew.
left. Yeah.
Yeah.
That guy
that
didn't
didn't happen.
exist anymore.
No.
Yeah.
No, he was long
He
gone.
was gone.
I remember my father telling me, you know, wow, you've changed.
Yeah.
You know, my temper was much, much quicker.
And I had a bad temper too.
And nobody crossed me. You know, it was going to be bad.
Well, I think you said it. Once you went there, there was no going back. And in terms of your own self,
Yeah.
there was things that affected you. You may not even have realized it when we got home. You knew something was there, but
The other problem with coming home was it was so damn fast. I mean,
Yes.
you weren't on a ship for 3 months or
Yeah.
6 weeks or whatever it was. You got on an airplane and you came home, and you were in society in a matter of minutes.
like John said, there was no deflating. You
No
mentioned
deflating,
that. No
yeah.
deflating. And as you just mentioned, I'm in California, I'm discharged
Yep.
right after I come home, within a couple, whatever it was. And then I'm in New York City, and I'm unfortunately, before I got on the fire department, I had a job down on Wall Street. And I'm standing on Wall Street looking at these hundreds of people walking by saying, don't they know what's going on? This is 68.
Yeah, no,
don't
yeah.
they know what's going on over there? It's like everybody's going by, get back on
Yeah.
that, treadmill there, and life goes on.
Yeah.
And it was like, holy shit,
Well, they didn't really care either.
No, but everybody
That was the bad part.
has their life, but There was no transition, easy transition. You know?
I buried it deep, and I kept busy, you might say. I wound up going to law school on a GI Bill, which was a piece of crap back then. If you went to school full-time, either graduate school or college, they gave you $205 a month to cover everything.
Yeah.
I did.
Everything.
I know. I took
And then when my non-wife, or we had a child, we weren't planning, and then they raised it to $215 a month. But by then the marriage was shot already.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you couldn't tell I was a Marine by looking at me, and I wouldn't tell you I was a Marine and I was in Vietnam. In fact, one time, Nikki took me to meet some veterans, right? And I met these veterans, and they were like anti-war. And it's like, it didn't click with me, you know? And she said, "What happened?" I said, nothing. I said, I'm not there, you know?
Yeah.
But,
I got busy when I got back. I got onto the fire department. The rush was there, and I started to study, and I put my energy there.
Yeah, I did the same.
And fortunately, I moved pretty well. But the thing is, if there's a lesson, you always hear this about lessons from Vietnam, right? You know, everybody thinks the military lesson. The lesson from Vietnam is to treat the people that you send there decently while they're there, by having a mission that you're going to accomplish, and then when they get home, by treating whatever they need to be treated with, whether it's good VA care, good hospital care, good psychiatric, good access to jobs, and whatever.
Yeah.
Because they're fighting for this country.
Yeah.
You know.
well, we thought we were fighting for this country. I don't know how you felt about it, but I came to realize early on that we were not fighting for our country, and that we weren't fighting communists, and we weren't trying to fight them over there so they wouldn't come here. I realized that pretty fast, but I didn't say a word. I just kept going.
You're right, because it was all for nothing. I went to Vietnam in 2008. My wife and I spent a month there. And life is so normal there. I remember talking to my friends when I was in Vietnam, what would happen if we lost the war and the Viet Cong won and the North Vietnamese won. Would anything change? Nothing changed. When Janet and I went to Vietnam, the rice paddies were being tilled by the water buffalo. The only changes that took place were in the cities.
Yeah.
Right.
So nothing changed. If we had never fought that war, nothing would have changed. It would still be the same. And the ultimate irony of it all is they love Americans. If you're an American and you go to Vietnam today, they have the magnanimity of the victor to the vanquished. They treat you the way we treated the Japanese and the Germans after World War II. They're happy to see you. They treat you well. It was kind of it kind of blew my mind that's the way it was. When I went over there, I kind of expected to be hated, but I wasn't.
Well, that's a fitting end to this, because I guess a little bit of communism and a little bit of American intervention helps. On the
Hopefully the world
capitalistic
learns
way.
something from the whole thing.
Thank you very much for participating, guys.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Really
Welcome
has.
home, guys.
Yeah.
Welcome home.
Welcome
Welcome
home.
home.
Thank you.
Welcome home, brother.
Decker.
Okay.
We could have gone
Thanks
on for
so-
hours.
I know.
It was ridiculous.